Welcome to the Sci Invictus worlds, where incredible stories unfold. The ancient scroll flickered on the holographic display, its edges worn from digital decay. The museum curator's voice quivered as she recited the prophecy that had haunted galaxies for ages. 3 blades, forged from the heart of a falling star, each bearing a curse of eternal scars. 1 grants power but chains the soul. 2 brings pain that never grows old. 3 binds forever in slavery's hold. Only hands untainted by power's grace can free the bearer from this cursed embrace. The curator paused, her fingers hovering over the display. This legend dates back to the first galactic era. The swords of Kroa haven't been seen for over 3 millennia. Suddenly, the hologram flickered and went dark, leaving only static in its wake. Felix Morris wiped down his counter for the 5th time that hour, more out of habit than necessity. His small shop on Alpha 9 Station wasn't exactly bustling, but he enjoyed keeping it spotless. Various bottles lined the shelves behind him, their contents glowing in impossible hues. "Ah, the thrilling saga of spices continues," he muttered, adjusting the display of his latest creation. Starlight dust, a seasoning that made food glow softly in the dark. Next to it stood his pride and joy, spicy peck sauce in its distinctive red bottles, alongside the refreshing Citron Quick lemonade, which had somehow become the station's unofficial hangover cure. The shop's door chimed as a tall Andromedan in expensive corporate attire strutted in, his metallic skin reflecting the shop's soft lighting. "Ah, the great Zark," the customer exclaimed, dropping to his knees. "I have traveled across 3 systems to taste your legendary spices." Felix sighed, running a hand through his disheveled brown hair. "Please get up, sir. The floor was just cleaned. And I'm no Zark, whatever that is. Would you like to try our new calming tea? It's quite good for anxiety, but the prophecies speak of. The prophecies probably need a good cup of tea." 2. Felix reached under the counter and pulled out a small tin. "Here, on the house." The Andromedan accepted the tin with trembling hands, treating it like a sacred artifact. Felix watched in bewilderment as the customer backed away, bowing repeatedly, until he collided with the door. "People are getting weirder," Felix mumbled, returning to his endless counter-wiping. Though, he had to admit, they were polite these days. A flash of light outside his shop window caught his attention. The station's artificial day cycle was in full swing, but this light was different, piercing, almost violent. Felix squinted, making out a shape hurtling toward his shop. That can't be good. The shop's door exploded inward, showering metallic fragments and swirling energy through the chaos. Through the dust and debris stepped, or rather, stumbled, the most striking woman Felix had ever seen. Her skin was a deep, mesmerizing purple, and her white hair floated as if in zero gravity. She would have been the most beautiful being he had ever laid eyes on, if not for the 3 massive swords impaled through her chest. Her golden eyes locked onto his. "You, Zark traitor," she gasped, her voice like honey over broken glass. "Remove the swords." Felix stared at the blades protruding from her chest, his first thought being quite practical. "Those are really going to scratch my counter." The woman, if that's what she was, stumbled forward, her movements graceful despite the 3 enormous blades. Each sword was unique. One blazed with internal fire, another absorbed light, and the third pulsed with an eerie blue glow. "This is probably bad for business," Felix muttered, already calculating the cost of the broken door. "Ma'am, I have a very nice tea that might help with, sword-related issues." She reached the counter, her golden eyes intense. "I am Astrid Norris, and I've waited 3,000 years for you. Well, about that Zark thing. Everyone keeps saying that, but I'm just a spice merchant. Though, I do have this new sauce that..." Astrid collapsed forward onto his pristine counter, sending bottles scattering. Felix instinctively reached out to catch her, his hand brushing against the hilt of the flaming sword. To his surprise, it was cool to the touch. "Pull it out," she whispered, her face inches from his. Only you can. Well, it is scratching the counter. Felix wrapped his fingers around the hilt, expecting resistance. Instead, the sword slid out as easily as pulling a spoon from honey. Light exploded through the shop, and Astrid gasped, her back arching as golden symbols appeared in the air around them, spinning in complex patterns. The sword in Felix's hand hummed with power. Said Felix, holding the ancient artifact of phenomenal cosmic power like it was a particularly troublesome ladle. I hope this doesn't void my shop's insurance. Astrid straightened, her movements suddenly more fluid. She stared at him with an intensity that made him want to check for spice stains on his apron. 3,000 years, she breathed, leaning closer. 3,000 years I've been bound by those blades, and you just pulled it out because it was scratching your counter. I just cleaned it, Felix replied defensively. And, those other two are still there, by the way. Should I? All in good time, my Zark, she said, her voice taking on a sultry tone that made Felix's ears turn red. Let me properly thank my savior. She moved around the counter with inhuman grace, despite the two remaining swords still lodged in her chest. I have some very nice tea, he began. I don't want tea, Astrid replied, smiling and revealing perfect teeth, with a hint of fawn. I want to know everything about the man powerful enough to free me, the one whose culinary creations are already legendary across 3 galaxies. Oh, you mean the spicy peck? It's really just a basic fusion of earth habaneros and Senin fire peppers. Anyone could. The sauce that can power starships? That's just a rumor. Though, there was that one time a customer claimed it helped him achieve FDL travel. Astrid laughed, a sound like silver bells. You truly don't know, do you? Your power, your heritage. She reached out and touched his chest, her purple fingers leaving a tingling warmth. The Caldwell blood runs strong in you. Felix frowned. Caldwell? No, it's Morris. Felix Morris. Though my grandmother did make a mean curry. Suddenly, the shop's emergency shield activated, sealing the broken doorway with a shimmering force field. Beyond it, a crowd gathered, their faces pressed against the barrier in awe. The prophecy is fulfilled, someone shouted. The Zark has freed the sword-bound one. Felix groaned, rubbing his temples. I really should update my insurance. Astrid, still too close for comfort, smirked. Oh, my Zark, your adventure is only beginning. Felix swallowed hard. Would anyone like some tea? And that's how the greatest adventure in galactic history began, with the most powerful being in existence offering everyone a nice cup of tea, completely oblivious to his own magnificence. The keeper of Caldwell history struggled to process what was happening. Here stood the culmination of millennia of cosmic power, the final heir to an ancient lineage of reality shapers, and he was more concerned about the ripeness of his fruit than the fate of the universe. Astrid, leaning casually against the counter, smirked. My Zarch, she purred, golden eyes gleaming. Perhaps the nice, flickering entity would appreciate an explanation. Felix, entirely unfazed, offered the keeper a steaming cup of tea. You look like you could use this. Relaxing blend. Unless you prefer something energizing. I've been experimenting with a Starfire chai, though last time it accidentally reversed entropy in a 3 light-year radius. Still working on the ratios. The keeper stared at the cup as if it were a black hole. You truly do not understand the magnitude of your existence, do you? Felix took a sip of his own tea, considering. I mean, people have been really nice lately, but I figured that's just good customer service. You are a living artifact, the nexus of creation, the wielder of taste and time itself, the keeper thundered. You bend reality with a wooden spoon. Felix frowned. Bamboo spoon. Better for mixing spices. What absorbs too much flavor. The keeper made a strangled sound as if debating whether to collapse into existential despair or embrace this absurdity. Felix, entirely unaware of this turmoil, went back to sorting berries. The starberries were pulsing gently, forming tiny constellations in their juices. "See? Barely glowing today," Felix muttered. "I was hoping for more of a nebula effect." Astrid chuckled. "My Zarch, I do believe you are the first cosmic deity to be disappointed by the luminosity of their fruit." The keeper gathered itself, shifting into a more defined form, its voice now heavy with purpose. "Felix Morris, you must understand. You hold in your very essence the accumulated wisdom and power of an entire civilization. With a thought, you could forge new realms, reshape existence, and entire conflicts before they begin." "Oh, I do that all the time," Felix said absent-mindedly. "Last week, I settled a galactic trade war by inventing a new spice rub. Perfectly balanced the heat and the sweetness, which apparently is a great metaphor for economic policy." "Who knew?" The keeper faltered. You negotiated peace through seasoning?" "Yes." Felix brightened. "Oh, that reminds me. Do you prefer a smoky or citrus finish?" "I've been trying to enhance the undertones without overwhelming the primary palate." The ancient being, wielder of cosmic knowledge, stood in stunned silence. Astrid, watching with deep amusement and not a little adoration, moved closer. "My Zarch, I think what our glowing friend here is saying is that you are perhaps the most powerful being in existence." Felix shrugged. "I'm just a spice merchant, a pretty mediocre one at that. These berries are barely supernova level today." The keeper's form flickered violently, as if reality itself were short-circuiting. "Felix," it took a deep breath, or the metaphysical equivalent of one. "Do you have any idea what your presence does to the fabric of reality?" Felix tilted his head, thinking. "I mean, people have been acting a little dramatic lately. Lots of kneeling, kind of inconvenient for mopping, to be honest." The keeper looked to Astrid, perhaps hoping for an ally. She simply leaned against the counter, arms folded, golden eyes sparkling. "Oh, don't look at me." I tried to tell him. He thinks making entire civilizations weep with a well-balanced marinade is normal. Felix snapped his fingers. "Speaking of which, I have a new blend I've been working on. Last batch made people see through time, but I think if I adjust the cinnamon levels..." A sudden crash interrupted him as the station AI blared an emergency alert. "Warning. Dimensional instability detected. Several factions approaching. Prophetic wars may be imminent. Also, a new reality has spontaneously formed in Sector 9. Please confirm if intentional." Felix sighed, wiping his hands on his apron. "That keeps happening. I should probably put up a sign or something." The keeper, seemingly at the brink of cosmic exhaustion, muttered, "You don't need a sign. You need an entire council of divine guardians." Astrid grinned, flexing just enough to make the surrounding air ripple. "Oh, I've got that covered." Felix, still entirely unconcerned, adjusted his spice rack. "Well, while we're sorting all that out, would anyone like some fresh pastries? I've been testing a new recipe for hyperdimensional croissants. They're only slightly destabilizing local gravity fields this time." The keeper buried its face in its hands. Astrid laughed, stepping beside Felix, protective and amused all at once. "My sweet Zarch," she murmured, "you are going to be the end of reality as we know it." Felix smiled. "Oh, that's nice of you to say." Epilogue: Star Spices and Sweet Moments. The Star Spices franchise spread across the galaxies, but Felix insisted on keeping his original shop on Alpha 9 Station. Each restaurant became a nexus of peace, where beings from across the universe gathered to share meals that occasionally altered the fabric of reality. The legendary swords continued to serve as display stands, their world-ending power mostly used to prop up the daily specials board. Felix eventually discovered they made excellent cooking implements, though he had to be cautious not to slice through dimensional barriers while chopping vegetables. One evening, as the station's day cycle dimmed, Felix stood in his shop, stirring a new sauce recipe. The pot shimmered, small galaxies spiraling into existence with each turn of the spoon. Astrid, her presence both comforting and protective, wrapped her arms around him from behind. "My Zarch," she murmured, "do you ever wonder about your power? Your destiny." Felix considered this, watching nebulae swirl in the pot. "You know what I wonder about more? Whether this batch needs more salt." Astrid sighed, then laughed. "Felix, you just created new solar systems." "Yes, but are they tasty solar systems?" She tightened her embrace, resting her chin on his shoulder. "After all this time, you still think you're ordinary." "I am ordinary," he said simply. "I just have extraordinary spices. And an extraordinary you." The sauce continued its quiet cosmic dance. Somewhere outside, beings of pure energy were already lining up for tomorrow's opening. But none of that mattered as much as this moment, this simple truth. Sometimes, the greatest power isn't in reshaping reality or commanding armies. Sometimes, it's in knowing exactly who you are, finding joy in small things, and sharing that joy with others. Felix Morris, the most powerful being in existence, had never wanted to rule the universe. He just wanted to make it a bit tastier, a bit kinder, one cup of tea at a time. And perhaps that was the greatest magic of all. You know, sometimes I wonder if we're all a bit like Felix's spices, each of us carrying some kind of magic we might not even recognize. Maybe true power isn't in grand gestures or cosmic destinies, but in those small moments when we choose to add a little flavor to someone's day. I like to think that somewhere out there, Felix is still brewing tea, Astrid is still rolling her eyes at his obliviousness, and the universe is still being held together by simple acts of kindness. Perhaps that's what makes a legend. Not the ability to reshape reality, but the wisdom to know that reality is already perfect when shared with a warm cup of tea and a friendly smile. After all, as Felix would say, anyone can change the universe. The real trick is making sure it tastes good while you do it. Remember, you don't need to be extraordinary to do extraordinary things. Sometimes, all it takes is being exactly who you are, with perhaps just a pinch of magic, and maybe a dash of spicy peck sauce. With warm regards and a side of accidental dimensional riffs.